The lights of Los Angeles shimmered beyond the glass as Keanu Reeves sat quietly in his trailer, his fingers gently tracing the worn edges of an old photograph. It was a picture of him and Sandra Bullock from years ago, taken during the filming of their first movie together. They were laughing then, carefree, unaware of how deeply that moment would remain with him. The world had changed, and so had they, but something between them still lingered, unspoken, warm and deeply human. On that same evening, Sandra walked into the studio lot, her steps light but her heart heavy with memories. She had agreed to do a special interview about kindness in Hollywood, and to her surprise, the host had hinted that someone special might join. She didn't expect it to be Keanu. She hadn't seen him for months, yet every time she thought of him, her chest filled with quiet calm. Their bond was not defined by fame or romance, but by an understanding that few could explain. As Sandra entered the room, Keanu stood up instinctively, his usual calm smile softening the air around them. "Hey, Sandy," he said in his low voice, almost a whisper, yet filled with warmth. Her eyes met his, and for a brief moment everything else faded. The crew stopped, sensing something genuine and unfiltered. Two people who had seen life's pain and still chose kindness stood before them, connected by years of respect and silent care. Ana de Armas, who had come earlier for her own interview, stood at the doorway, unnoticed. She had always admired both of them, but seeing them together like this, natural, real, and unguarded, was something else entirely. She watched as Keanu reached for a chair and offered it to Sandra, as though the years had never passed. His gesture was simple but filled with grace, the kind of humility that can silence a crowded room. The interviewer, sensing the rare energy in the air, smiled nervously. "It's been a while since you two were seen together," she said lightly. Sandra laughed, her hand brushing a strand of hair away. "Too long," she replied. Keanu nodded softly, his eyes resting on her face for a second longer than usual. "But some things don't change," he added, his tone gentle. Anna felt a wave of emotion she didn't expect. It wasn't jealousy, but awe. There was something sacred in the way they treated each other, without ego, without pretense. When the cameras started rolling, the conversation turned unexpectedly emotional. The interviewer asked about a moment in their lives when kindness had changed everything. Sandra paused, then spoke slowly. "There was a time," she began, "when I was going through something personal and someone just showed up without asking for attention, without saying anything. He sat there, said nothing, but that silence healed more than words could." Her voice trembled, and everyone in the room felt it. Keanu looked down, his fingers tightening around his chair, remembering that day vividly. It was years ago when she had lost someone close, and he had driven 3 hours just to sit on her porch in silence, keeping her company until sunrise. Anna's eyes glistened as she realized she was witnessing something beyond acting. These were two souls who had endured heartbreak, loss, and loneliness, and yet they had chosen compassion every single time. After the shoot ended, the studio emptied quickly, but Sandra and Keanu stayed behind. The golden light from the window fell softly on them as they talked quietly, laughing about old times and sharing gentle silences in between. Keanu leaned back looking at the sunset. "You know," he said, "some people come into your life and even after years they still feel like home." Sandra smiled, her eyes moist. "And some never really leave," she whispered. Anna had stayed back, pretending to check her phone, but really she couldn't move. She felt as if she was watching the kind of moment everyone secretly hopes for, but rarely finds. Pure connection without need or condition. It wasn't love in the romantic sense. It was deeper, built from shared respect and quiet loyalty. She had seen actors fake affection on screen, but this was something real. As the light faded, Sandra got up and Keanu instinctively helped her with her coat. His fingers brushed against hers for just a second, and that tiny gesture carried more meaning than any scripted scene ever could. They said goodbye softly, promising to catch up soon. But both knew that promise carried weight. It meant something now. When Anna finally stepped out, she saw Keanu standing alone by the parking lot, watching the evening sky. She hesitated, then walked over. "Keanu," she said softly, "that was beautiful." He turned, his calm eyes meeting hers. "What was?" he asked with his quiet curiosity. The way you look at her, Anna said, her voice almost breaking. It's not something people see often. It's like gratitude and pain mixed together. Keanu smiled faintly. Maybe because that's what life is, he replied. Gratitude and pain side by side. But if you care enough, both become something beautiful. Anna didn't know how to respond. She simply nodded, realizing she had just learned something she would carry for years. Sometimes love isn't loud. Sometimes it's a soft glance, a shared silence, or a simple act of kindness that asks for nothing in return. As Keanu walked toward his motorcycle, he paused for a moment, looking back at the studio where Sandra had been. His expression softened again, almost imperceptibly. He whispered something to himself before putting on his helmet, his words carried away by the evening breeze. Thank you, Sandy, he murmured, for still believing in good. Anna watched him leave, her heart full. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but tonight, she had seen something unforgettable, a reminder that the world still held gentle souls who didn't need to shout to be heard. The camera outside, the studio caught a glimpse of Keanu riding away under the orange sky, his silhouette fading into the distance. Anna stood quietly, feeling the moment settle deep within her, a story she would one day tell with trembling voice and full heart. And just as the night deepened, Sandra stepped out from another door, holding her phone in her hand. She looked around, searching for him, a faint smile playing on her lips. Her phone buzzed, a single message from Keanu that read, "Ride safe tonight. I'll see you soon." She looked at the message for a long time, her eyes glistening in the streetlight. Then she whispered softly to herself, "You always know when to say just enough," and the screen faded to black, leaving the audience in silence, feeling every ounce of emotion, every heartbeat of what had just unfolded. Two souls, years apart, yet perfectly in sync. The night after that quiet reunion stayed with Sandra longer than she expected. She tried to focus on her next shoot, but her thoughts kept circling back to Keanu's words, his calm voice, the way he had said, "Some people never really leave." She had heard many things in her life, but that line lingered like a song she couldn't stop replaying. In her hotel room, she sat by the window, the city lights of Los Angeles glowing below her. She opened her phone again, scrolling back to his message. "Ride safe tonight. I'll see you soon." It was simple, yet it carried a weight she couldn't ignore. She typed a reply, then erased it 3 times before finally writing, "You always know when to say the right thing." She hit send and watched the message disappear into the quiet digital void. Keanu, meanwhile, was home, sitting by his kitchen window, a mug of tea beside him. He read her message, smiled faintly, and for a long time didn't type anything back. He didn't need to. Some conversations lived better in silence. Instead, he set his phone down and looked at the photo on his wall, an old candid of them laughing during a break on set years ago. He had kept it not because it was perfect, but because it reminded him of a time when everything felt honest. 2 days later, a charity event in downtown Los Angeles brought them together again. Keanu had quietly agreed to donate and attend, unaware that Sandra was on the guest list. When she walked in wearing a simple black dress, all eyes turned. The cameras flashed, but Keanu didn't notice the lights. He was standing by a small group of volunteers, listening to a young girl talk about how the foundation had saved her family's home. His focus was fully on her, and the sincerity in his expression made Sandra pause. Ana de Armas was there too, having been invited to speak about resilience in the film industry. She spotted Keanu and Sandra across the room and smiled softly. She could still feel the warmth of that night at the studio, the authenticity that had silenced her. As the event progressed, Sandra found herself standing beside Keanu again, near a display of photos showing children helped by the foundation. He glanced sideways, his eyes lighting up slightly. "Didn't expect to see you here?" he said, his tone playful but soft. She smiled. I could say the same. For a few moments, they stood silently, watching the slideshow of faces. Keanu spoke first. "You know, I used to think doing enough was just donating money," he said quietly. "But then I realized it's about showing up, being there. Even if no one notices." Sandra nodded slowly. "You've always shown up, Keanu. Even when no one asked, his eyes softened. Maybe because people did the same for me when I needed it most, he said, his voice almost breaking on the last word. She wanted to ask more, but before she could, Anna joined them, holding 2 glasses of water. You two again? Anna teased lightly, trying to hide her emotion. Every time I see you together, the world feels calmer. Sandra laughed while Keanu smiled. Maybe that's just age, he said jokingly, making them both laugh. But there was something behind his eyes, something that said he was thinking about much more than jokes. Later that evening, when the speeches began, Anna took the stage. Her words were sincere, but her gaze occasionally drifted toward the back of the hall, where Keanu and Sandra sat side by side. She spoke about compassion, about how true strength was the ability to remain kind in a world that wasn't. Her voice trembled slightly when she said, "Sometimes the quietest people teach us the loudest lessons." Her eyes briefly met Keanu's, and he gave her an encouraging nod. She smiled and continued, but inside she knew she was speaking about him and about Sandra. When the event ended, Sandra excused herself to make a quick call. When she returned, Keanu was gone. On her chair, however, lay a folded piece of paper. She picked it up, curious. It was a note written in his careful, simple handwriting. It read, "It's easy to lose faith in people, but some remind you why you believed in the first place. Thank you for still believing, Sandy." For a long moment, she stood there in silence. Her throat tightened. No one had written her words like that in years. Honest, unguarded, and pure. She placed the note in her bag carefully, as though it were fragile. That night, Anna joined Sandra in the parking lot, noticing her expression. "You okay?" she asked. Sandra smiled softly. "He left a message." Anna tilted her head. "What did it say?" "That he still believes," Sandra replied, looking up at the night sky. "And that maybe I helped him remember why." Anna's eyes shimmered. "That sounds like him." "Yeah," Sandra whispered. "That's the problem. Everything about him still sounds like him." The 2 women stood there, the cool breeze brushing against their faces. Anna hesitated before asking, "Do you ever wonder why people like him always seem to carry both peace and sadness at once?" Sandra nodded, her eyes distant. "Because people like him have seen loss," she said quietly. "And instead of letting it harden them, they let it teach them how to care deeper." Anna fell silent. She thought of all the times she had seen Keanu on set, how he'd help crew members lift equipment, how he'd eat quietly beside stunt workers, how he'd thank everyone before leaving. He never spoke much, but his silence always meant more than words. The following week, Sandra received a package at her doorstep. Inside was a book, Letters of Light, an anthology of people's real stories of kindness. A small note was tucked between the pages. "Found this at a bookstore. Thought you'd like it. Maybe we could add our own chapter one day." "Kay?" She laughed softly, her heart fluttering in a way it hadn't in years. It wasn't romantic, it was deeper. It was the feeling of being seen, understood, and valued without explanation. As the days passed, their messages grew more frequent. Not every day, but enough to make her look forward to her phone lighting up. Sometimes he sent her photos of sunsets, sometimes quiet quotes. One night he sent, "Do you remember the silence on set that day?" "It still feels like the safest sound," she replied instantly. "I remember. Some silences never leave you." And in another part of the city, Keanu smiled as he read it. Outside, rain began to fall softly, tapping the window like a melody only he could hear. He whispered to himself, "Some silences are worth keeping." But just as he turned off the light, his phone buzzed again, an unknown number with a message that read, "Mr. Reeves, it's about the project in New York. There's something you need to know. It concerns Mrs. Bullock." He froze for a moment, his calm eyes narrowing slightly as a quiet tension settled in the room. The peaceful night air shifted. He stared at the message, his heart suddenly heavier. Something was coming, something that would test everything he thought he understood about connection, loyalty, and truth. And as the rain poured harder outside, Keanu whispered, "Not her. Please, not her." The secret behind the silence, the rain didn't stop that night. It fell endlessly, as if echoing the heaviness in Keanu's chest. He sat at his table, the light from his phone still glowing faintly. The message stared back at him like a whisper he didn't want to hear. "It concerns Mrs. Bullock." The words were simple, but they carried weight. He didn't know who had sent it, and he didn't want to believe it could mean something bad. For a while, he just sat there, trying to steady his breath. He didn't want to jump to conclusions. People in their world often created rumors, especially when two old friends reconnected. But this message felt different, too direct, too personal. He finally replied, "Who is this?" No answer came. He waited. 5 minutes, then 10, then 20. Silence. The next morning, Keanu woke early and rode his motorcycle toward the hills, trying to clear his mind. The city looked peaceful from up there, wrapped in clouds and morning light. He thought about the years he and Sandra had spent apart, the moments they never talked about, and the way she had smiled during the charity event. He couldn't let some anonymous message steal that peace. Yet something deep in his gut told him that this wasn't just gossip. Something was off. At that very moment, miles away, Sandra sat in her living room reading through a script. But her mind wasn't on the words. Her phone buzzed. Ana de Armas had sent her a message. "Hey, are you okay? I heard something strange from someone on the set about you and Keanu." "Want to talk?" Sandra frowned. Strange. She typed back quickly, "What did you hear?" Ana replied after a minute. "They said someone might be trying to use your name for a project Keanu's involved in. They called it a joint charity deal. I don't know the details, but something felt off." Sandra's heart skipped. She had never agreed to anything like that. She knew Keanu would never sign her name without asking. Still, she suddenly understood why the unknown message might have reached him. Someone was trying to drag both of them into a mess neither had created. By afternoon, Keanu arrived at the same coffee shop they had often visited during film shoots. He sat at the corner table, waiting. When Sandra walked in, he could tell from her eyes that she already knew. "You got a message too?" he asked quietly. She nodded. "Someone's using our names. Maybe to get money. Maybe to get attention." He exhaled, rubbing his forehead. "That explains the call I got from New York. Someone wanted to confirm our involvement in a joint event. I hung up, but it felt wrong." They sat silently for a moment, both trying to make sense of it. Fame had its dark corners, and both of them had seen what greed could do to people. Still, it felt personal this time, as if someone wanted to break the fragile peace they had just rebuilt. Anna joined them a few minutes later, her expression serious. "I found something," she said softly. She slid her phone across the table. It was an article draft scheduled to be published online the next morning. The headline read, "Keanu Reeves and Sandra Bullock's secret partnership under investigation." Sandra's breath caught. "Investigation?" "It's fake," Anna said. "I checked the writer's name. He's not real. It's all part of a clickbait chain that feeds off fake celebrity charity stories. But someone submitted this one early, probably hoping it would go viral." Keanu's jaw tightened. "Who would do that?" Anna hesitated, then whispered, "Someone who wants to hurt your image. Maybe even test how you'll react." The weight in the room thickened. Sandra reached out, her hand brushing Keanu's arm. "Don't let them take your calm," she said quietly. "That's what they want." He looked at her hand, then at her face, and gave a faint smile. "They won't," he said softly. "But it's strange, isn't it? Every time life gets peaceful, something comes along to test it." That evening, they decided to stay quiet, to not react publicly. But Keanu couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't random. Someone had gone through effort to find both their names, their timelines, their charities. And as he sat at home later, scrolling through his phone, he noticed something, an email he hadn't opened yet. The subject line read, "You don't know what she's hiding." He froze. It was sent from the same domain that had delivered the earlier message. He clicked it open, heart beating faster. Inside was a single photo, Sandra, years ago, sitting beside a man at a small film set. There was no context, no date, no explanation. Just one line beneath the image. "Ask her why she never told you about this." He stared at the photo for a long time, confused. He recognized the location, an independent short film shoot from over a decade ago, long before they had reconnected. But the man beside her looked familiar, though he couldn't place him immediately. His mind began to race. He didn't want to doubt her, not even for a second. But whoever was behind this knew exactly how to plant seeds of uncertainty. The next morning, Keanu met Anna again. She was already waiting outside his apartment, concern written all over her face. "You look like you didn't sleep," she said softly. "I didn't," he admitted, showing her the email. Anna studied the photo. "That's Eric Warden," she said finally. "He used to manage charity contracts in Europe. He got caught in a fraud case years ago. Disappeared after that." Keanu's eyes darkened. "Why would he send this to me now?" Anna shook her head. "Because he wants something. Maybe revenge. Maybe money. Maybe he thinks you'll protect her?" Keanu clenched his jaw. "Then he doesn't know me. I don't react with anger. I act with clarity," he called Sandra right away. She answered on the second ring, her voice calm but tired. Before he could speak, she said, "I know about Eric, and I was going to tell you." Keanu went silent. She continued, "He was part of a project I supported years ago. It went wrong, and I pulled out when I found out it wasn't clean. I lost a lot because of it. That's why I stopped joining public causes for a while." "So he's the one behind this," Keanu said quietly. "I think so," she whispered. "And I think he's using us to rebuild his image." Keanu felt a slow burn inside him, not of anger, but of protectiveness. "He's not going to touch your name again," he said. "Don't do anything rash," Sandra warned. People like him thrive on chaos, but he didn't answer. Because deep down, he already knew what he was going to do. That night, Anna found him sitting outside the studio where they had first all met. The same bench, the same golden light flickering across the walls. "You're thinking of going after him," she said softly. Keanu looked up, his calm eyes steady. Not to fight, to understand. People like him hide behind shadows. Sometimes the only way to stop them is to bring light. Anna nodded slowly, understanding his quiet resolve. "Just be careful, Keanu." "Not every truth heals," he smiled faintly. "Maybe not. But silence doesn't heal either." The night grew colder. Keanu stood looking out toward the city lights once more. In his pocket, his phone buzzed again. A new message from an unknown number. This one read, "If you want answers, come alone. Midnight, Pier 45. He looked at the message for a long moment, then whispered softly, "All right, let's see what truth looks like tonight." And as he walked away into the quiet Los Angeles night, his shadow stretched long behind him, carrying hope, pain, and the heavy silence of someone who still believed in kindness, even when surrounded by deceit. The meeting at Pier 45, the ocean wind carried a strange chill that night, the kind that brushed against skin like a whisper, warning you before anything else did. Keanu Reeves stood at the edge of Pier 45, the city lights flickering faintly in the distance behind him. His motorcycle was parked several feet away, its engine still warm. He had arrived early. He always did when something mattered. The pier was almost empty, except for the rhythmic sound of waves striking wood below. He looked around quietly, scanning the shadows, his expression calm but alert. The message had been simple, come alone. He had told no one, not even Sandra or Anna. He didn't want them involved in something that could get darker than it already was. For a few long minutes, nothing happened. Then, from the far end of the pier, a figure appeared. Tall, wearing a dark coat, his movements slow and deliberate. Keanu recognized him even before he saw his face. Eric Warden, the same man from the photo. The same man who had betrayed dozens of people's trust years ago. Eric stopped a few feet away, smirking faintly. "You're still the same," he said in a low voice. "Show up early, quiet as ever. I was almost betting you'd ignore my message." Keanu didn't reply. He simply watched him, eyes steady, waiting for him to speak first. "You're wondering why I brought up Sandra's name," Eric continued. "You always protect the people you care about, don't you?" Keanu's jaw tightened. "What do you want?" Eric chuckled. Straight to the point. "I like that. What I want, Keanu, is to tell a story, one the world doesn't know, one that could change how people see you and her." Keanu didn't move. The wind tugged at his jacket. The waves below grew louder. "Back then," Eric said, pacing slowly, Sandra helped fund a foundation I started in Europe. She didn't know it, but one of her silent partners was using her donations for laundering. When she found out, she cut ties, and the whole thing collapsed. I lost everything. She walked away clean, and I became the villain. Keanu's voice was calm. You became the villain because you lied, Eric smirked. Truth depends on who tells it. I'm not here to argue. I'm here to warn you. There are files, emails, signatures, things that could make it look like she knew more than she did. People online love scandals. Imagine how fast that spreads. Keanu took a slow breath. And what are you hoping to get from this? Money? No, Eric said, leaning closer. Not money. Attention. Redemption. If I go public, I get relevance again. But if you help me get back into the business, say, a partnership with your new foundation, then maybe I forget the past. For a moment, there was silence. Keanu stared at him, expression unreadable. Then he said quietly, You think kindness is something you can manipulate, but it's not a currency. It's a responsibility. Then Sandra's phone buzzed. She checked the screen. It's Anna, she answered quickly. Anna, what happened? Anna's voice came through fast, panicked. Eric's at a press conference in downtown Law. He's showing documents, your signature, Keanu's name, everything. They're broadcasting it live. Keanu grabbed his jacket. We're going. Keanu, if we let him speak first, the lie wins, he said firmly. They drove together, Sandra silent beside him, her hands clenched around the folder. The city felt heavier than usual, crowded with flashing lights and murmurs. When they reached the hotel where the press event was happening, security tried to stop them, but Keanu's quiet insistence and Sandra's composure broke through the noise. Inside, the ballroom was packed. Cameras, microphones, reporters, all turned toward a stage where Eric Warden stood, smiling confidently as he displayed printed pages to the crowd. This, Eric said dramatically, holding up a contract, is proof that both Keanu Reeves and Sandra Bullock knowingly participated in my foundation's transactions. They called it charity. I call it calculated fraud. The reporters gasped. Flashes went off. Keanu's face remained unreadable. Sandra's hands trembled slightly, but she stood tall beside him. Keanu walked forward, straight to the microphone. The room went quiet. You're right about one thing, he said calmly. It was charity, but the only fraud here is your attempt to rewrite history. Eric turned, smirking. Ah, the hero speaks. Do you have proof? Keanu looked at Sandra, who opened the folder slowly, her eyes locked on Eric. Yes, she said quietly, and I kept it for 15 years. She handed the documents to the nearest reporter. These show where every payment went, who signed them, and how Eric forged additional documents after I withdrew. You'll find his handwriting on the fakes. I never spoke about it because I didn't want to ruin anyone's name. But I guess silence only helps the liar. The room erupted. Cameras flashed wildly. Eric's smirk faltered for the first time. Keanu took a step closer to the microphone again. His tone was gentle, but his words cut through the chaos. This isn't about fame or reputation. This is about what happens when kindness is mistaken for weakness, when good people are punished for trusting. But the truth always finds its way through the noise. Always. The room fell silent. Reporters lowered their cameras. Some even looked ashamed. Eric tried to speak again, but the event manager cut his mic. Police officers entered moments later, approaching him discreetly. Someone had tipped them off. Keanu turned to Sandra, his expression softening. She looked up at him, tears welling in her eyes, but her face calm. You shouldn't have come, she whispered. I told you, he said softly. Silence feeds lies, truth deserves a voice. Anna arrived just then, breathless. She had watched everything from the hallway. When she saw Sandra and Keanu standing there, side by side, strong, unwavering, she felt something she couldn't describe. It wasn't just admiration. It was the realization that courage didn't always roar. Sometimes it spoke gently, like this. As police escorted Eric out, the crowd slowly began to applaud, not because of scandal or spectacle, but because two people had just turned vulnerability into strength. Outside the hotel, the sky was beginning to darken again. The ocean wind followed them as they stepped out, exhausted but lighter. Sandra turned to Keanu. You saved me. He shook his head. You saved yourself. I just reminded you how. She smiled faintly, wiping her tears. You always know what to say, don't you? He smiled too. No, I just say what I mean. They stood there for a long time, the city noise fading into the background. For the first time in weeks, the silence between them felt peaceful again. But just as Keanu started to walk toward his motorcycle, his phone buzzed once more. He glanced down and froze. It was a message from an unknown number again. Only this time it said, "It's not over. You found one truth, but you still don't know who filmed that night at the pier." His eyes lifted toward the dark horizon. The waves crashed harder against the distant shore. The storm wasn't over yet. When the ocean remembered the night sky above Los Angeles was darker than usual, clouded and heavy, as if the city itself knew a storm hadn't yet passed. Keanu Reeves stood outside his house, the glow from his porch light faintly touching his face. He read the message again, "You still don't know who filmed that night at the pier." His breath slowed and his mind sharpened. Whoever had done this wasn't just chasing scandal, they wanted control. Inside, his phone buzzed again. This time it was Anna. "Keanu," she said, her voice fast, anxious. "I think I found something. You should come to my place now." "It's about the video." He didn't ask questions. He just said quietly, "I'm on my way." When he arrived, Anna was sitting by her computer, the glow of her screen reflecting off her face. "I got access to metadata from the video file," she said quickly. "It was uploaded through an encrypted source, but look," she pointed to the screen. "The coordinates embedded in the file came from the studio lot where we filmed that interview, the same night we all met again." Keanu's eyes narrowed. "So the footage wasn't random," Anna nodded. "Whoever recorded it knew where to find you later, but that night, only a few people were even around, you, me, Sandra, and the small crew." She hesitated, then whispered, "Keanu, I think someone from that crew sold the footage." Maybe not knowing what it would be used for. Keanu's voice dropped low. "Can you trace it?" "Already did," she said, opening another window. "The clip was first uploaded to a dummy account connected to an entertainment blogger. But that account was paid from a larger fund, one belonging to an old media firm." She paused. "The same firm Eric Warden once invested in before his foundation collapsed." Keanu's heart sank. "So he didn't act alone," Anna nodded grimly. "He had help, and whoever helped him is still trying to stir things." Keanu leaned back, thinking. His mind returned to that night at the pier, the shadows, the camera's strange flicker from the distance, the feeling that someone had been too close. "Someone wanted both of us discredited," he said. "If Sandra's past looked dirty and I looked complicit, they'd control the story before we ever spoke." Anna's expression softened. "But you both told the truth today. People believe you now. Truth travels slower than noise," Keanu said quietly, "but it lasts longer." Before he could say more, his phone buzzed again. It was Sandra. Her voice was calm, but something in it carried an unease he hadn't heard before. "Keanu," she said softly, "there's someone outside my house." He straightened instantly. "Who?" "I don't know," she whispered. "A car's been parked for an hour. I saw someone get out. I think it's the same man from the press event, Eric's assistant." "Stay inside," Keanu said firmly. "I'm coming." "No," she said quickly. "If they see you here, they'll twist it again. Please don't come alone." But he was already moving. "I'm not letting anyone threaten you again." Anna followed him out the door, determined not to let him go by himself. "You'll need proof if anything happens," she said, grabbing her camera. "Let's finish this with light, not anger." By the time they reached Malibu, the ocean had turned wild, waves crashing against the rocks below the cliffside house. Keanu parked quietly, scanning the driveway. A black sedan was idling near the edge. Its headlights were off, but he could see a silhouette inside. "Wait here," he told Anna. He approached slowly, his steps measured. As he neared, the car door opened. The man stepped out, tall, tense, a nervous twitch in his hand. "You shouldn't have interfered," he said, voice shaking slightly. "It wasn't supposed to go this far." "You worked for Eric," Keanu said steadily. The man nodded. "He wanted attention. The video was meant to push the story, make it explode before the truth could surface. But after the conference, he panicked. He told me to delete everything. I tried, but the company that bought the footage won't stop. They want the story alive. Scandal pays more than truth." "Who's behind them?" Keanu asked. The man hesitated, eyes darting nervously toward the road. "Someone in the industry. A name you'd recognize. They're building a documentary about celebrity hypocrisy. You and Sandra were supposed to be the headline." Anna stepped closer, her camera recording quietly. "Then you're going to tell the world exactly that," she said firmly. The man's hands trembled. "They'll ruin me." Keanu's voice softened. "They already did. You just don't want to carry their guilt forever." The man looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. "There's a drive in the car. Everything, emails, payments, call logs. It proves who planned it. Take it." Anna retrieved the drive, clutching it tightly. "We'll make sure this ends the right way." The man whispered, Just tell her I'm sorry," before getting back into his car and driving away into the night. Keanu turned toward the house. Sandra had stepped out onto the porch, her hair blowing in the ocean wind. She looked at him, her eyes glistening with gratitude and exhaustion. "You didn't have to come," she said softly. "I always would," he replied. Anna walked up, holding the drive. "This has everything. Once this goes public, the story ends." Sandra took a deep breath, looking out toward the sea. "No," she said quietly, "it doesn't end with exposure. It ends with grace." Keanu looked at her, puzzled. "If we make it about revenge, we lose the very thing they tried to destroy, our peace," she said. "Let's show the world what truth really looks like, calm, steady, and kind." Keanu smiled faintly. "You still believe kindness wins?" She nodded. "I believe it's the only thing that ever truly does." Anna uploaded the files to a public transparency archive the next morning. Every document, every timestamp, every piece of proof went online, with no sensational headline, no blame, just quiet honesty. The world saw the truth in its purest form, and something remarkable happened. People began to share it not as gossip, but as inspiration. News outlets shifted tone. Articles changed from Reeves and Bullock scandal to actors respond with integrity and silence. In a few days, the noise faded. Eric's company lost its investors, and the firm behind the manipulation collapsed under its own deceit. 1 week later, Keanu and Sandra sat on a wooden bench overlooking the ocean. Anna filmed a short clip for a foundation's kindness campaign. Keanu spoke first. "Sometimes people try to twist good things into weakness, but the truth is, kindness is strength. It's the quiet kind that never gives up, even when the world misunderstands." Sandra smiled gently, adding, "The hardest thing isn't forgiving others. It's forgiving yourself for the times you stayed silent, but silence doesn't define you, how you rise after it does." Anna turned off the camera, tears glinting in her eyes. "That's perfect," she whispered. As the sun began to set, the three of them sat quietly, the orange light painting the sky in gold and red. Seagulls passed above, their wings cutting through the wind like whispers of peace returning. Keanu looked at Sandra. "You know, the first day we met again, I thought maybe the world had changed. But it hasn't, it's just louder, and in the noise, truth still whispers." She smiled, eyes soft. "And you always hear it first," he laughed quietly. "Maybe because I stopped trying to shout." She reached for his hand, and for a moment they just sat there, two souls who had endured storms, learned from silence, and chosen grace instead of anger. As the waves touched the shore and the camera blinked its final red light, Anna whispered, "This isn't the end of a story. It's the beginning of a legacy." And as the ocean wind wrapped around them, the frame faded to black, leaving behind a feeling not of victory, but of peace.